Listener beware, No Time to Game is a podcast chock full with spoilers. If your intent is to play this game and you don't wish the ending to be spoiled, turn back now. And then come back when you're done and let's talk about it. Welcome to No Time to Game, a quest for game-life balance where we play and talk about short games, indie games, and anything else that doesn't demand you sacrifice your relationships or force you to keep a bottle nearby for when nature comes a-calling. I'm Devin, and I just don't have the hundreds and hundreds of hours anymore to play MMOs, open-world games, and loot grinds.
And I'm Josh, and I play all the games so that Devin doesn't have to.
This week I played Genesis Noir on Xbox One, developed by Feral Cat Den and published by Fellow Traveler. This was a point-and-click adventure with some puzzly elements and a mysterious subplot. I feel like this was less of a game and more of a piece of art, and like most art, I was left confused and a bit dizzy.
Absolutely. This game just came out a few days ago, so we actually both played through it this week, and the first thing that struck me was definitely the aesthetics. It was a different-looking game. I really liked it. I think, liken it to sort of old-style cartoons, like early cartoons. Like, it reminded me a lot of the Pink Panther. I don't know if you watched that when you were a kid.
I did. Yes, yeah. I mean, this was all black and white as well, it's worth mentioning. Although, I mean, there was some yellow, I believe, was the other color in there. But primarily, pretty basic stick figures and a lot of, black and white situations going on.
Yeah, I really liked the way they did that. So that it was black and white, but they would use gold basically to draw your attention to things that were important. And that was how they kind of guided you around the levels. Like, this is where you got to go, or this is something that you can click on to, move the story forward. I really like that use of just the single color to guide you around to what you were supposed to do.
And very little guidance there was in this game. I mean, other than the occasional flash of yellow, you were left on your own to figure out what you were meant to do. And it's not like there was infinite possibilities of things to do. You were moving your mouse around a lot to see, where your cursor changed to either a hand or something. But I mean, there was no other guides as to what, and the puzzles themselves were very confusing. I mean, a lot of them didn't seem to have a point. It was a lot of trial and error, I found. Maybe you found differently.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Did you play a lot of point and click games back when they were popular?
I mean, give me some examples.
Like, there was a whole bunch of LucasArts ones that were popular. Sierra used to make games like King's Quest, and The Curse of Monkey Island, I think, was a popular one of the LucasArts ones.
I've definitely played them before, but they're not high on my list.
Yeah, I played a fair bit of these back in the day. We had a computer, in the mid 90s or so, when those games were really at their peak. And this game did kind of remind me of that, because they were very, like, you just try stuff and see what happens. Those old games were brutal in the fact that lots of times when you did the wrong thing, it killed you and you had to start over. So thankfully this game didn't do that, but it was very just poke at stuff and see what happens.
Yeah, there were no enemies to worry about in this game. It wasn't there wasn't really any. There was no dying. There was no failure. You just tried until you figured it out. And sometimes that was very frustrating. I had to end one of my streams early because I could not get past a puzzle.
Yeah, I had that same bug on that same puzzle, and I don't know what happened other than it had to have just been a bug, because when I restarted, it just worked first try, and when you restarted, it worked first try.
Yep.
But again, this being a new game, I think that's probably why that happened. It'll probably be patched and fixed in another 3 days, so maybe we're just sort of beta testers in that regard.
I mean, every level I completed, I got a rare achievement on Xbox. So, like, yeah, what did you say that it's an achievement that less than 10% of the gaming population has, and that makes it rare?
Yeah, I think the way it works is that with the Xbox achievements, if you have played the game, it counts you as the pool of players, and if you get an achievement that less than 10% of that pool of players have gotten, it counts as a rare one.
So basically, a bunch of people started the game and gave up after the first level.
Yeah, or I mean, they're still working on it and just taking their
Right.
time because we
Sure.
beat it over a couple of days. So, but yeah, so the puzzles, there was quite a few of them, and it was sort of broken up into levels. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the layout of the game and how the levels worked?
Yeah. Well, we started out this. It seemed like it was in the 1950s, and we started out just on the street selling watches, kind of out of our jacket, our trench coat. There was sirens going by, police cars driving past, and we hid under our fedora and behind our trench coat, and then called people, passersby that were just silhouettes of people. They had no features. Called them over to buy a watch, and we'd sell them a watch, and then we would go back to our home, which was in a clock tower, which was pretty neat. And you kind of searched around the clock tower little bit to try and get familiar with your surroundings and the mechanics. And we find a folded up napkin with a pair of lips and a phone number on it. Also in this apartment is a rotary phone, so we dial this number.
I think that was probably the first puzzle of the game because, not a lot of people playing this game have probably used a rotary phone.
Puzzle number one.
Yeah, I was impressed that you knew how it worked immediately. I used one when I was a kid, but like we had one that I think my grandparents had, and
Yes, same.
at that point, like it was old and it was a novelty. But at least I know how it works.
That was the same with me. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that we had one at my house, but now that I remember, it was actually at my grandparents' house. Probably, I think it was in the sitting room.
Right.
And occasionally, just for fun, I would use it to call my parents if I was there. And yeah, I would, like, they taught me how to use it, so it was a lot of fun to turn the. So this was very nostalgic. Anyway, so we dialed this number, and then I think it cut to this apartment, and we knocked on the door of, and we walk in. Actually, we end up breaking down the door. It's all done in this very stylistic, artistic way. Like, it's very hard to explain in a podcast, which is troubling. But we break down the door, and inside we see this man who we later find out is named Golden Boy, and he is a saxophone player for this woman that we've called, whose name is Miss Mass, and she is a jazz musician. This whole game is filled with jazz. There's always a jazz backtrack going. And so he's shooting, as we walk into the apartment, he's shooting this woman that we have gone to see. And then it kind of like freeze frames, and it's not so much a bullet that comes out of this gun. It's some kind of like a strange, how would you describe this? Like a galaxy scape kind of thing. It's like a wide.
Yeah, it had a black hole kind of at the start and a galaxy
Yeah,
escaping from it, and it was described, I think, in game as the Big Bang.
that's
So
right.
I don't know if it was just like a metaphor for the Big Bang, I guess.
Metaphor for the Big Bang or the bullet itself, or all of this is very confusing. But we end up, this is where it's going to get a little crazy to talk about, but we end up, I guess, trying to stop this from happening because, again, we've frozen frame. The galaxy bullet has not actually hit her yet, so we're trying to stop it. And the way that we do this is by entering different levels that are like within this bullet galaxy scape. So you're clicking on things, and sometimes it's just a little hint or something, or sometimes it opens up into a level and you go in, and first level is really just like back to the beginning, like the very beginning of time, where we're talking like amoebas and cells and at this point I'm lost completely. And it just kind of, from what I remember, not remember, but from what I understood, each level is getting like further along evolution of the planet and of animals and creatures and humans.
It seemed like it started with kind of the beginning of the universe, or
Yes,
at least the levels kind of started with sort of the beginning of life, and then
right.
went up until like the future, which I guess we'll get to that later. But you sort of start with early humanity and start moving your way up through these levels, and each one has kind of a couple of puzzles in that time period.
Well, yeah, I mean, between each level, there's quite a lot of there's these segments that there's a lot of text that comes up on the screen to read that is, well, it's basically a science lesson on all of the physics and the science behind, the Big Bang, basically the
Yeah, I
creation
wasn't
of.
expecting a science lesson with this game at all.
No,
That kind of threw me off guard, but
I
it
wasn't
was
either, but I did find it pretty interesting. I'd like to try and find one of these to read on the podcast. One of these.
yeah, it's probably gonna be hard to find stuff like that for this because it just came out. I think this is gonna be a running segment on our podcast of us trying it unsuccessfully to Google things.
All right, screw it. Next question.
Like you said in that first level, there was the start where you were kind of planting seeds, and it was sort of the beginning of the universe. That was, I think, the very first thing that you did in this game, really.
Yes. Right, seeds of light, seeds of darkness, and there's these seeds of gold and energy of some kind.
And I guess, yeah, that was kind of the first time where you go between sort of a point and click game and actually being able to run around. It was sort of like free roam. You could wander around this place, but it wasn't really heavy in the puzzles. You would plant a seed in these places, and then you would get like a little mini puzzle for each one, which they were cool, but not too memorable. And then I think you start sort of moving up. You go through, and there's like cave paintings in one of them, and then you go into like this place with I think there was a samurai in there, and you're sort of moving through timelines.
Ronan, I remember him. Yes.
And you're meeting characters along the way. There was a huntress lady, and the samurai guy. But there was, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about those kind of early levels. They weren't as memorable to me as the later ones. I didn't find.
No, we can. I mean, we can skip on past those. I really liked. I think you're going to bring up the musician who we met. I really liked that level. He left an impression on me. By that point, I was less confused and more into the game, and it was starting to kind of. I was figuring out how it all fit together, and then we met. Was it the musician we met next after those two, or was he the last one? I think he was the next one.
I think
yes,
actually
he was.
you can do some of this in different orders. Some of the levels were interchangeable, I believe, because I think you did a few slightly different than me, but it mostly followed the same trajectory.
I feel like I just went from right to left. I don't
think that's what I did too, for the most
Yeah.
part. But you could have gone the other way, I think.
Interesting.
So I don't know. Maybe you could have gone backwards through time for this whole first section. But yeah, the musician level, that was my favorite level. It really felt like the devs of this game had a strong music background.
Definitely.
Like you said, there was a lot of jazz everywhere and stuff, and this level was just satisfying, I think. Like it started with you kind of playing jazz with this guy, and it was basically Simon Says. Like you had 4 buttons and you just copied what he did. But then it got into, you were just sort of moving the cursor around, and it was playing sounds based on where you were moving, and it was kind of creating the world around you. So it was fun, like just to make noise in one aspect, but also like it was visually really cool. And I think that's where this game really did it for me, was just being like satisfying to just tinker with. And this was like the prime example of that.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said before, the audio paired with the visual aspects of this game were a work of art. There were some levels that were quite fun to play. I wouldn't say that this game was a really fun game. Like it was more like I was appreciating it in a different way than I would normally a game where I'm like I get like that adrenaline that you get when you play a game sometimes.
Yeah,
it wasn't like that. No,
I think it was more satisfying than fun, which is weird.
Satisfying, sometimes relaxing, sometimes thoughtful. Well, I found it very beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like human nature or something, but there's just something like fun about just poking at things and seeing what happens.
There was a
And
lot of things that
there was
happened
a
when you
lot of
poked them.
that. Yeah. But yeah, in that music level, like I remember just swirling the cursor around for like an extra 5 minutes more than I needed to because it was just being like beep bloop bleep bloop bleep bloop when I would just move around. I was like, well, I'm gonna keep doing this for a while because I'm just grooving and enjoying
This is
myself.
fun. Yeah, this is fun. Exactly.
And it was they did this thing too where it kind of went whatever you were doing kind of went with the music, I think, regardless of how terrible I am at making music. It sort of
It was all on
sounded
key.
okay anyway. Yeah, exactly. um, I don't know if you've played Mario Maker. There's a couple of those games, one on the Wii U and one for the Switch, but they do this thing where when you so it lets you make Mario levels. This is a real
Yeah,
tangent, but
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it.
you can place blocks and whatever on this grid, and when you place an item or a block or whatever, it says out loud the name of the thing you're placing. So it might just say like question block, for example, but it says it in the key of the music that's playing. So if you're dragging a bunch of stuff, it goes to the music that's playing in the game,
Oh,
and
that's
it
cool.
kind of reminded me of that. So like it's just a whole slew of question blocks, but it's only getting out the first like and it's going up and down to the music. But that's what this reminded me of, and it was just with the visuals of it, I just found it right satisfying for some reason.
There were a lot of satisfying elements to this game, definitely. No, I agree with you on that for sure.
But yeah, so that was kind of the end of that level. You jam out with the guy for a little bit, and then I think the
Well,
next
he
level.
dies, right? At the end of it.
What did it show that then, or later in the ending?
I think it showed it then. Like you're doing this,
Oh
you're
yeah,
you're in
you've
this scene, and then you move the train around the circle, and like some guys, some like big wide henchmen get off the train, and then suddenly it cuts to him being gone, and his stand up bass being riddled with bullet holes, and you're just like, where did he go? What the hell?
yeah, and that's I guess a good point too. That at the end of each of these levels, you pick something up, which whenever you get back out of a level, it takes you back to that room where the guy's still shooting his gun and everything's still frozen in time. But you're adding to this board on the wall, like something out of a police drama or something.
Yes.
And it's almost like an evidence board or whatever, and you're placing all these things that you find, and
Yeah.
you get his stand-up bass from that one. And you're right, it was, yeah, he had gotten gunned down by mobsters or something.
And then we went, I don't know if it was immediately following, but soon after that we ended up in some space station working with a scientist for NASA, I believe.
Yeah, so I think at this point you were sort of in the future where they were trying, or I don't know, maybe I guess it could have been the present, but they were trying to do something with like a particle accelerator or something. And
Hmm.
I mean, this goes much beyond my scientific expertise. Uh,
Ditto.
but again, it was just a bunch of knobs and buttons, so you can poke and prod at those for a while and see what comes out. But that was probably my favorite puzzle. I don't know how you felt about that, but
Those puzzles were cool.
it was like a chalkboard on the left where the scientist had been writing notes of the things that they figured out were working. So it would say, turn this knob to this position and this button goes here, and then it would say like this one we're not sure. So you would follow the instructions and then you would fiddle with the ones they weren't sure about. And then it just kept building on that and adding more gadgets to fiddle with. And you had to keep making these certain waveforms. And that one again felt really fun just to press buttons and turn knobs and watch the waveform change, and like just to see what different combinations you could come with and stuff. But again, it was a lot of trial and error. There was a little bit of like pointing you in the right direction, but it was mostly just fiddling.
Yeah, they got progressively more difficult as you went. They'd add, like you said, another another gadget that you had to adjust to try and make this sound wave or whatever kind of wave it was replicate what was on the chalkboard, like you said. And then yeah, like less and less would be known. Like sometimes you'd have exactly which direction to put the knob or the dial, and sometimes it would just be question marks, and you just have to fiddle with it until you figured it out. I found that really fun. I didn't find that one. Those ones like were a little tricky, but they didn't stump me like a couple of the others, which might have been bugs, but I know one of them probably was. But there was a couple that got me stuck and a little frustrated. But this one I didn't find frustrating at all. I just found this one to be just fun. It was a fun puzzle.
I think too, when you were playing it on Twitch, it's probably a little bit different for being stuck. I get the sense that a lot of people on Twitch don't like being stuck somewhere because people are watching, whereas for me at home, if I'm just poking at stuff, but I like, have something on TV or a podcast going or something, it's a lot less frustrating to, I probably spent more time on that one than you did, but it didn't feel that way.
Sure.
Because I can just poke and prod and do something else at the same time, and nobody's kind of keeping tabs on my time or anything.
Yeah, I suppose I did have that kind of overarching pressure, like, this is getting boring.
Yeah, gotta keep things moving. And
keep this moving.
You had another one where the puzzle was you were picking shapes, I guess, and putting three shapes together, and the order you put them together would make these different creatures, and you had to match them up. And if there was some rhyme or reason to that, I couldn't figure it out. So I just tried stuff until it worked, and luckily it didn't take very long. But that was a problem that I had with this game. Like, I think I liked all the puzzles and all the parts of this game, but it was almost like the puzzles were too short. Like, there were so many of them, and each one only had maybe 3 or 4 steps, and it wasn't always enough time to learn what was actually happening.
Yeah, what's expected of me in this puzzle? Because like by the time you get to the end of it, you still don't know what you did to do it right. But
and I think part of that is because you could sort of brute force your way, but also if you're doing this puzzle and there's only 4 puzzles, they did do a good job ramping up the difficulty. It just seems like maybe there should have been 8 of that puzzle, so you could ramp up the difficulty more slowly and kind of catch on what was going on.
Yes.
Like the one with the particle accelerator, I played that for a little bit and did, I think, the first 2 or 3 stages without even realizing you could look at the chalkboard. And if I would have just muddled my way through, and I was getting it eventually, but if I would have kept muddling my way through that way, it would have gotten really frustrating at the end when I'm like, okay, there's so many variables here, and I'm just trying stuff over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, it was possible when there was only 2 or 3 machines to fiddle with, but once you're at the end, you've probably got 6 or 7 different dials and sliders to adjust. If you didn't know that you could switch to the chalkboard view, then you'd be at that for a long time.
Yeah, and the thing about the chalkboard was interesting too, because again, everything was in black and white, and the only thing on the screen that was gold was a little Post-it note with an arrow pointing left. And I didn't notice when I was playing, but I noticed watching you that was the only gold thing on the screen. And throughout the whole game, the gold things were telling me, hey, there's something you might not realize is that you need to be going after or looking at or whatever.
Yep.
So if you moved your cursor over to try and click on that Post-it note, it would automatically swing your view over to the chalkboard. So again, that was that good use of the gold to tell you, hey, there's something important over here. Like, don't just bang your head against this puzzle all day.
I mean, I did a little bit of that.
But yeah, so that was kind of the story you were going through, time up until sort of present, sort of not too distant future. And then I think there was some bits in those loading screens that you were talking about where there was like writing that was saying something about the end of the world and how, everything was getting swallowed up by a black hole and all this stuff was happening at this point. And then you get a whole new set of levels where you're sort of seeing the future and humanity escaping from the end of the world. I think the first one that I remember was you were at it looked like a bus station, but it was like basically a bus station, like a 50s bus station for people getting on spaceships to run away from Earth. And that was,
That's right.
I think that was one of the last puzzles where you had to use the departure clock to make the people in line depart. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
I liked that one a lot too because it was like you had the departures board and a clock, and you just had to spin the hands. And again, it was incredibly simple, but it was weirdly satisfying.
And yeah, each time that a group of people would leave, the departures also didn't say like different cities, they said different spaceships, which was kind of cool. But each time that you change the clock to the time that this ship was leaving, the station would look more and more like apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm.
There would just be like more debris on the ground, and like it was definitely like, I mean, the level was called Exodus, so it was everyone leaving to go off to, you know, what they assumed would be a better planet, because this one was going to be, I mean, I guess swallowed up by a black hole or something. And then you spend the rest of the levels trying to figure out how to prevent that from happening. This whole time you're trying to stop Miss Mass from being shot by this golden boy. And then it kind of shifts at this point, where you meet this kind of, you're going to have to, I don't know if you can fill in these holes, but I don't know who this person was, but you meet this kind of interstellar cosmic being who ends up having the huntress, the musician, the scientist, and the Ronin, like all in one kind of strange, tall, naked being
Yeah.
that you kind of develop this kind of strange relationship with, and together you try and stop not the bullet from hitting Miss Mass, but the world from ending, but from the world from being swallowed up by this black hole.
Yeah. So this is where things really went off the rails, but
Oh yeah,
also sort of started making sense.
it was weird balance that way.
Yeah, because you watch all these spaceships leave, and then you show up to where they were all leaving too, and there's a massive gold statue of the main character in the sky, which I thought was sort of strange. Like the whole way through, I kind of felt like, this isn't really happening, or you're imagining things or something. But then it kind of dawned on me then that like you were actually traveling through time and seeing these people, and then like all these people at the end of time seem to be worshiping you.
They saw you as this strange time traveling god that like showed up in the future to help the scientist come to her conclusions to like stop the Big Bang, and showed up to Ronan and the huntress and the musician to, you know, help them on whatever they were going through. But you were like this mythical cosmic being that, in the end, like you said, they were honoring, they were worshiping. I don't know. I don't I don't know what any of it meant.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about it for a couple of days. And so basically, what happened is this being shows up and seems to be made up of the people you've met along your journeys. And you find out all the different things that happened to those people. Weirdly, there was like multiple timelines. I didn't really get what they were going for there.
I'm not sure.
But you sort of see these different timelines of all these different people, and you have this weird dance party, and like it all kind of was really culminating on this, like, it went from being all black and white that whole time with a little bit of gold to like suddenly it was very colorful and like noisy, and there was a song playing, and there was like voice acting all of a sudden when there hadn't been through the whole game.
It was the first time that we heard any vocal dialogue. All of it was, well, I mean, there was no words at all other than the kind of, I wouldn't call them cutscenes, but like the scenes between levels where you're reading all of this sciencey text, and then suddenly there's speech bubbles, and this, interstellar being speaks, you speak a word or two, and then there's this song playing where there's actual lyrics. And do you remember any of the words to that song?
Oh, no. I was mostly just confused and laughing at that point.
It
It
was a
actually
crazy scene.
made me laugh out loud because it hit. I think it was supposed to be like more powerful because of, all this sort of sensory overload in this game that had been so bare bones. But it just made me laugh, like when it all happened and it all started going on. It just struck me really funny. But I guess maybe that's the point. They were just trying to draw emotion out of you after, whatever it had been, 3.5 hours of this game up till this point.
I mean, laughter's an emotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, you sort of see what happened to all these people, and then they all come together again into this being, and they basically tell you like it's okay. You don't have to save anyone, or start saying things like this, and then it goes back, and you see kind of your own timeline, and you see that you were a watch salesman, and you sold the watch to the singer lady, and she gives it to the saxophone player, who I think they were dating or whatever. And then you see that their relationship starts to break down, and she starts having a relationship with the main character. And that's what causes him to come in with the gun at the beginning of the game. So it all comes back to kind of your choices, or the things that you've done, selling the watch and meeting this lady.
And in the end, you're presented with a choice to, like, the first time that you can actually choose an ending. I don't know what ending you chose, but I could choose whether to enter the apartment with this woman or to leave the apartment and not save her.
Yeah,
Do you remember
and I
that?
think we chose opposite because you chose to leave, right?
I did.
To not start the relationship in the first place,
Correct.
and I chose the other one, and I went in and everything played out exactly how you expected it to play out, and the ending was basically I went off with this celestial being, and we went and had a coffee, and that was that. And your ending, you left and didn't have the relationship, so presumably the singer was alive, but otherwise you just went off and you were alone as the main character. What was interesting too was the names of the achievements. The one that I chose, it said you chose the less lonely, or no, it said you chose the lonely ending, and yours said you chose the less lonely ending. But in my ending, I had this celestial being with me, and in yours, you didn't. So I thought that was sort of strange because it almost seemed backwards.
Well, yeah, I was confused because I thought by not saving her, like this celestial being was telling me not to do, I would be more choosing this celestial being and not choosing this singer woman, Miss Mass. But then at the end, yeah, I'm sitting alone in this coffee shop, the Hopper, drinking my coffee, and then there's this moment where it says something about how this, I think it was talking about this kind of celestial being was a myth of some kind.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
I barely
Yeah.
caught it.
So my best theory on this is that was sort of the people he'd met along his lifetime, kind of all wrapped up into one, and probably not necessarily a real person. But what I kind of gathered was it was saying, everything's made up of the choices that you've done, and all the people you've met and all these things. Like, I think it was sort of going for an explanation of like fate or something like that. And what the being was telling you is that you don't have to save everyone or something along those lines, meaning that this woman is going to die, but that was sort of predetermined, or it's because of all these different factors or whatever. And that's kind of what I took from that, was sort of you just do what you do and things happen and so be it. And that was why I kind of chose the ending that I chose, because it seemed like that's what she was telling me. Like, not so much that, you've been spending this whole game trying to save this woman, but just let it be.
Hmm.
and it felt like a better ending to me, but neither one of them was very good, to be honest. Like, in the sense of either way, you were drinking alone at a coffee shop and you weren't with the singer.
No, it was kind of like she was saying, stop messing with, with the timelines.
Yeah.
You don't need to, like, she's going to get shot. Like, stop traveling around and trying to figure this out, and what will be will be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I got out of it. I mean, who knows? Maybe
Who
that,
knows?
if you ask the devs, they'd be like, no, that's very wrong. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've got any other theories about this, but that was kind of what I gathered. Was it was basically just a long tale about fate. There was also, a lot of references to this coffee shop called the Hopper. And in a lot of parts in the game, you would use matches from this matchbook from the Hopper, and I think its logo was a rabbit, and you would see rabbits a lot of times throughout the game. I don't know if you noticed that, but there was like a
I did.
rabbit in the lab in the spaceship or whatever, and different things. And then in the ending, when they went there, on the ending that I had, the being or whatever said, like, called the place the Constant, and in yours, I think it said your guy was narrating, and he said something like, "You would have called this the Constant." So there was definitely something going on with that coffee shop being like a real important plot point that I just didn't really understand.
You know what? I feel like there was a lot of underlying plot points that you and I
Yeah,
didn't pick up on.
yeah, and same with the stuff that happened at the start. I mean, there was somebody being thrown out of an apartment at the very beginning. Like, the person was throwing the clothing out the window, and you walked
Yes,
by and you pause and look at it, and then again at the ending, you, I think, walk out of there with the in the ending I had. I walked out with the being, but I think you still walked out of there in your ending, and you come. It looked like you came out of that same apartment, but maybe you were just
I think
walking by the
no,
same
I
apartment.
think that's true. I mean, at that point, I think I was still kind of fried from that dance scene. That all of that was like a bit blurry because it was just so you know um overstimulating for a little bit. But yeah, I didn't pick up anything at that point. I don't think.
Yeah, I think there. I mean, through the whole game, I think there was a lot of symbolism that I probably just didn't pick up on. There was a lot of things like around sort of jazz and music, and then there was a lot of stuff around, like, there was a deer head that you saw in like a cave painting, and that kept coming back up that I didn't really understand what the point of that was. Um, there was these coils, like, that were meant to be springs, I think, or they were like they represented like coils of time or the universe or something, but they were also parts of watches. So there was something going on with that. And there's quite a bit that I sort of thought, this probably means something, but I don't know what. So whatever, moving on. But you know,
Um,
still
yeah.
enjoyable, even though I probably didn't understand 90% of it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think maybe a more intellectually deep person could glean a lot more from this game than you or I did, but it was still pretty enjoyable for you know, I don't know how to describe us without being insulting, so I won't.
Yeah, for a
Um,
couple of dumbasses like us, it seemed
yeah.
all right.
How would you rate this game, and would you recommend it to others?
Yeah, that's so. I will admit, I'm a huge fan of weird games. The weirder, the better. So I would probably give this game a 9.
Yeah,
Would I recommend it to others? It depends. I
depends on the
really liked
person.
it, but I could understand why people wouldn't, for sure.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't blanket recommend this to all of your friends,
No,
but
absolutely not.
if you knew someone that was into the strange and the artistic, then yeah, I mean, for sure, I would probably give this one. I was thinking an 8. There was a lot about this game that I did enjoy. There was a lot about this game that I didn't understand, and I'm okay with that. But I mean, I kind of left this game a bit dizzy, which is fine. But I'm not rushing to play it again. But I mean, it was still good. It wasn't too long. It was a good length. I feel like I spent a while at a museum or whatever, and got my fix of art for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the puzzle parts could have been a little bit longer to help you learn them. But overall, I think the game was maybe even a little bit too long for a game of this type. Like
A little bit.
I liked the game a lot, but at maybe like 3.5 hours, I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to be done. And then it went on for an extra like 30 minutes to an hour, which, not the end of the world, but I think it was a little longer than it needed to be.
By the end of it today, I was like, when you told me there was probably about another hour left, I was thinking, are you sure? Like, I feel like
Yeah,
we're nearing the end. How much more can they
I
get
think
out of this?
that might have been part of it too for me, that like I got to this point where, the ships are leaving Earth and all this, and it really felt like this is the end. And there was even something in the game where it said, there's no turning back from here or something like that, which I think we've just been trained by video games to know that if they use that kind of language, it means, hey, the game's about to end.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah.
But there was still like an hour left after that, and I think that might be why it felt long to me. Because I don't think the game itself really felt that long. I just kind of was expecting an end for the last hour or so that I was playing it. I guess the only thing left to say is, did you think that this was a good game for somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to play? I mean, we talked about the length, but what about the addictiveness of this game?
I guess there was some intrigue, but I was not. By the time I was done with my stream, I was okay with moving on to another activity, which is good. That's a good thing for me. I need games that I can focus on other tasks when the time is to, when I need to make dinner, I need to be able to make dinner and not be
Right.
like thinking about what I'm going to do next. Like,
So when you
this,
weren't playing this game, you really weren't thinking about it
I was trying not to. You know what I mean?
for
Like,
your own mental stability.
yeah, I needed to turn it off. I needed to not think about it until the next time, because if I did, I would probably like fall into a black hole of like theories and stuff. Like, so it's just like, okay, I'm done playing for now. We'll try again tomorrow. Pick it up, and that was that. So I mean, for me, this was a good choice. I mean, it was on the strange side. I do like all. I mean, I'm learning now. I haven't in the past, but I am learning to like stranger games with a bit more of an edge, less mainstream for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a good choice. What's next?
So we've gone for hard, weird, heavy, story-driven type stuff.
Yeah,
So
give
I'm
me something
thinking you
light,
need a break, and I'm going to give you something
goofy.
really just ridiculous. And that game would be Battletoads.
Battle
And
Toads? Is that a
Battle
toad?
Toads, which is a 2020 I don't know if it's a remake, but sequel, I guess, to the Battletoads games that were, I think, all made in the 90s.
I don't think I played any of those.
Oh, they were
What system were they
notoriously
on?
hard beat 'em ups. I think they would have been on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis.
Is
One of
is
the
this game notoriously hard?
No, this game's not so bad. Um,
Okay.
it's part beat 'em up, which is what the classic Battletoads were, but there's
Okay.
also some other stuff thrown in. There's a few different genres kind of mixed in there. A lot of kind of silly humor and just foolishness throughout. So I think you'll enjoy it. It's not too tough. It's not too long. I think I beat it over a weekend or something when it came out.
I could use some humor after the past 2 weeks of
Yeah.
choices.
So it's definitely a lot less serious. It's got a nice like Saturday morning cartoon vibe. I think some of the animations and stuff were even done by some people that worked on Rick and Morty.
Okay. Well, that's it for this week's episode. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/RogDev, that's ROGDEV, to watch me stream the games we talk about, or catch up on old streams by subscribing to No Time to Game on YouTube. You can also join our Discord server with the link in the podcast description for important announcements and general chatter. Or if you're more of a fan of good old-fashioned email, you can send me questions, comments, or game suggestions to notimepod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to No Time to Game. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It is helping us so much, so you can be notified then of the upcoming episodes, and you will not miss any of them. Press X to skip the credits.